Welcome to The Right Stuff, your home for all things on the writing craft. I'm your host, James Mansfield, architect of the Ivory Chronicles universe. Architect sounds much cooler, plus I feel the metaphor is apropos. And today we're going to be talking about developing characters. I decided to move away from the series about getting your start as a writer because I felt I covered a decent amount of beginning topics. Developing characters was just kind of the next logical step for me to take. If you find this video helpful, please remember to like and subscribe as it helps me grow. So what does developing characters entail? There's really a whole lot that goes into this for your book. Some characters you don't really have to develop as much, while others you have to develop a significant amount in order to really get that feeling of someone your readers can connect with. For instance, Mrs. McGonagall is a teacher at Hogwarts. Harry Potter is a child left with a scar after a curse from the evil Lord Voldemort rebounded, who then got sent to his relatives that made him live under the stairs because Voldemort killed his parents, and his relatives hate him because he's a wizard and from the wizarding world. You get it. There's going to be characters who need to have significant development because they're an integral part of the story, which makes sense, right? So you're not necessarily going to enrich the story of someone playing a minor or next to non-existent role. Your protagonist will need to be developed much more than anyone else. Some might even say that you don't need to name certain characters that have a minor passing role in your novel. While I agree somewhat, I think that context matters. Will your character hear the name in passing? Is your protagonist the type of person to disregard someone's name just because they have a fleeting interaction with them? For instance, in Ivory Chronicles, there's a guard known as the Citizen Liaison, who helps guide people in preparation for a ceremony that honors them for valiant deeds. He tells them kind of where to stand and when, makes them feel comfortable, chit-chats with them until the ceremony starts, etc. So like he's kind of a public relations person. He's present for only like a chapter and then he's gone. So his name is Haddock. Since Haddock has a personality, as opposed to the serious nature of most guards, and has to make these honored guests feel welcome, it definitely makes sense for him to be named, right? It's part of his job to make connections to these people that he's guiding rather than be this stagnant sentinel like kind of all the rest of the guards around him. Now, I didn't go into his backstory and reveal a ton of information about him that wasn't useful to the plot, but I felt I couldn't have my characters just call him Citizen Liaison, even for a mere chapter, because it would have violated the heart of his occupation. How many people go around calling others by their occupation anyway? Pardon me, librarian, where can I find this adult section? Yes, cashier, I would like my milk in a bag. Bit of a rabbit chasing moment, so let's move on. When developing your characters that have a large role in your novel, either the antagonists, villains, supporting characters, or whatnot, it's really important to consider who they are, who they were, and who they want to be. Even if some of this information never comes up in the novel itself, you need to know it, because it provides flavor to those the reader is witnessing. So if your audience is reading your character and they feel it's one-dimensional, it's likely because you don't know who they are. You haven't sat down and taken the time to really get to know your characters. Seriously, if you're talking your antagonist, just take some time, sit in a quiet room and think about their life, think about their past, think about their future and motivations and all that good stuff. Do they have siblings? Did they have an easy childhood? Were they molded by a thriving metropolis on a distant planet where skyscrapers were made entirely of glass that only people like your character's rich elite family lived in the penthouse levels? Are they driven to achieve high standards in the robotics industry one day? You have to know your characters, because if you don't, your audience won't. And worst of all, they'll know that you don't know your own characters. And that's kind of really bad, because then they'll rapidly lose interest. So obviously a well-developed character can be somewhat subjective, right? Not everyone looks at like John Wick the same way. Not everyone looks at Kaladin the same way. Not everyone looks at Luke Skywalker the same way. But it's still important to recognize the objective development of a character. And it's hard to measure, but there's some things that you can look at to tell if your character has been properly fleshed out. So look at the decisions that your character makes. If you're in a fantasy universe and let's just say a princess is trying to find an amulet that has magical powers to save her dying mother, would she leave a sick woman she comes across who doesn't have a husband and she's got 2 kids, and would the princess try to help? Some extraneous circumstances might manipulate that decision, of course, but her background and intentions are going to shape her decisions. And a little bit of a footnote here, this is technically part of the plot, but even if the audience doesn't know yet why she's seeking the amulet, that decision is still going to be dictated by that reason without being explicitly stated. So moving on, personality is something that really contributes to a character. Personality is another difficult thing that can be tough to nail down, because you don't want your characters to have one aspect of that personality to completely define who they are. Just like in real life, right? This causes your character to feel one-dimensional. They're angry, so every single response is going to be this anger-filled rage answer. Please don't do that. You want your audience to want to hang out with these people. No one would want to hang out with someone who has one defining personality trait. It'd be boring, annoying, or both. So how do you establish a personality before actually writing them? Maybe you can't, not completely at least. One trick though is to kind of have them be interviewed, like type out an interview by a fake character or a journalist. Have them ask your characters all sorts of questions. Have them ask what your character's motivations are. Then see what kinds of responses you can give your character. Also, don't be afraid to throw your characters in different situations apart from the norms. Now, I'm mostly talking about in the story, so as you're writing, do this. Your characters need to be changing and growing anyways throughout the story, so definitely throw them a curveball or two and just kind of see where it goes. If a scene doesn't work for whatever reason, you can always take it out later, but at least you'll kind of have that well-rounded personality that you're giving your main character, or any of your characters if they play a prominent role. You might even surprise yourself at what you come up with. Keep in mind that your supporting characters should vary. You don't necessarily have to go into a deep dive, like I said, with each one, but when you have characters with different backgrounds, different creeds, and are of different races, you create an interesting and really dynamic cast that will draw your readers in. Finally, remember to develop your villains. Your villains cannot be left out of this process. Unfortunately, stories can't really get away with the evil nature villain anymore. You can't really have him or her be the villain because bad guy. If you really want to engage your audience, you have to make them feel at least some level of sympathy or empathy toward the villain. If you have a Dark Lord, ask why the Dark Lord is trying to rule the world. If you have an evil dictator, ask how this dictator came into power in the first place and what their motivations are for trying to gain total power over a nation and oppress its people. Bring some humanity to their lives. It really makes for an engaging read. So that is pretty much it for me today. Thanks for watching, and if you have anything to add or discuss, just comment below and let's talk about it. So thanks for joining me, and keep writing.